everyone. Great to see you again on the second day of Women in Leadership Economic Forum. How are you feeling this morning? Good or just good? Good, yes? Excellent. I want to feel that energy in the room because our next subject I'm very passionate about personally. It's about making CSR more than PR. So I'd like to introduce my next guest speaker, who is a communications professional. She is passionate about empowering women in the energy sector. She's also the Executive Vice President for Strategy at ENGIE, a company serious about women empowerment and CSR in the Middle East and beyond. Please put your hands together and welcome my guest, Florence Fontani.
Hello, Hermoine.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. So I want to begin, Florence, by asking you, how many of you know the difference between corporate philanthropy and CSR? It's kind of like a gray line. Florence, can you tell me what is the difference between corporate philanthropy and CSR? Because sometimes we can get confused about those subjects.
Thank you, Hermione. If you may, I would just like to thank you and applaud the WIL team, because I think that yesterday and also this morning, we are full of energy, full of constructive meeting. And so I would say bravo. Bravo to the WIL team.
Absolutely.
Yes, I think that we could applaud them.
Our team down the back. Amazing.
So CSR, you know, Hermoine, CSR is one of my favorite topics. And I would like, and perhaps it's our mission this morning, is to convince you that CSR is a great topic, a huge topic. So I am passionate about CSR, and so let me convince you that it's a passionate topic. So what's the difference between corporate philanthropy and CSR? For me, it's very important. Please don't confuse corporate philanthropy and CSR, because CSR is, you know, has a much wider scope than corporate philanthropy. For sure, corporate philanthropy is very important and is useful. And during several years, I've been in charge in an NG Foundation of a specific foundation to help young people to find a job. And each time giving a second chance to, I remember, you know, David, I remember Leila, and to help them to find a job, it was really a huge emotion. So yes, corporate philanthropy is very useful. But for me, CSR is not just a gift. CSR is more than that. And we must, and I think it's quite the difference, we must link, you know, the best of the two worlds, solidarity and also business. And perhaps some of you will find strange to talk about business when we talk about CSR. But I really think that it's the circle, I could say the virtuous circle, you know, to really mix the both of the best world, meaning solidarity and business. So for me, CSR is much more than corporate philanthropy. And perhaps you could remember, you know, the definition of United Nations. The definition was, and for me it's very important, that CSR include the social, the environmental, and the economic concern of your company.
So 3 areas.
Exactly. So I think that for CSR, don't be ashamed to link business and your CSR actions. I think it's the main difference between corporate philanthropy and CSR.
Thank you for clarifying that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. So I want to ask you today, how many of you in corporates or are the head of certain companies that have a CSR strategy in place and are actually activating it and being useful in the economy you're in or wherever country you're coming from? Can you show a raise of hands if you have a CSR strategy? That is amazing to see. So we have a few dozen hands raised there. So by the end of today, we should be talking more about CSR. We should have an idea of what it's about, and we can take that back to our companies, our corporates, our friends, and we can start making a difference and being that difference as well. So can you also tell me, it's a hot topic, CSR. When we talk about CSR, everybody throws CSR all over the place in the press. I hear everybody doing some form of CSR, but really it's about making a difference. Now, ENGIE is one of those companies, ladies and gentlemen, I actually check them out myself, and they practice what they preach. They really do CSR, and they've got the figures to prove it. Can you tell me what you do at ENGIE that is different and unique when it comes to CSR?
Perhaps just a word for the audience. ENGIE is a global energy player, so just perhaps to understand our speech. I think that something very important for me is that for ENGIE, we have a chosen CSR policy. And I say that because, you know, I think that a lot of big groups, like ENGIE, but not only, live quite a paradox. Because in one hand, they are finger pointed because they make profits. But on the other hand, they are more and more solicited to social actions. So quite difficult, you know, for the group to choose because each time the social causes are great. So I decided for ENGIE to say no. To say no because I want to say yes, but for specific CSR action, meaning CSR action that are really linked with the DNA of ENGIE, of my company, with the culture, with my history. And I think, you know, it's very important that it's a chosen CSR action and not an opportunistic one, or it could be also a first one. Mm-hmm. And it's also why I like, you know, in my team, Brigitte, who is in charge of CSR, and she said, okay, CSR is creative social responsibility. Mm-hmm. I think she's completely right, because I like this word creative, meaning that you choose your CSR action in line with your DNA, and means also with creative that you are building CSR together, meaning with the employees. So it's why it's very important at the ENGIE level I really want to co-build, I could say, the CSR action with the employees. So meaning that, for example, we work and we have done quite a lot of workshop at the headquarters of ENGIE here in Dubai, but also in each country with all the employees. So we have done some workshop to understand the local realities, to understand what people want, but always, because you know I say that it's a chosen CSR policy, but always on the voluntary basis. And I'm really happy because I think that employees really want to be embarked, you know, in CSR policy. And for example, for the last workshop, we have 87% rates of participation. And we embark the employees, so to choose our CSR policy, but we also embark our customers, stakeholders. That's not so easy because to embark the stakeholders and customers, but I think it's always important because it's always, you know, this idea that CSR need to be rooted in business. It's really something that is very important for me. It's why we embark also, not all of our customers because it's impossible, but some of our customers to think with us, with our employees, what will be the chosen, I could say, CSR policy. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we have done quite a lot of workshops, and after this workshop, we have decided to have 3 main topics. So really in line, you know, with ENGIE DNA. The first one is access for energy for access to energy for all. Mm-hmm. The second one is clean energy and clean ocean. And the third one is education, but technical education. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you know, it's not possible to have these 3 topics in each country that we are covering. So the idea is to say, okay, we need to be completely in line with the local realities. So, for example, for Saudi and for Pakistan, we have only one focus. It will be education, technical education. Mm-hmm. For the UAE here, and you know it's a quite very important topic, the main topic is clean ocean and clean
Absolutely.
Air. And for example, for access for energy to all, this will be the focus in India. This will be the focus in Turkey and also in Oman.
Amazing work. ENGIE's doing amazing work. Audience, I just want to go over to you and ask you, because we're talking about transparency today and being authentic and making CSR more than PR. I want to ask you a question now. What do you think we can do to make corporates more transparent when it comes to CSR, to have more authenticity and to be transparent? Anybody, any ideas? Raise your hand and we'll send the microphone over to you. Apart from legislation, of course, anybody? We have a question over here. Please, if you could stand up and say your name and let us know what you think.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Asha Nathan. I'm from a company called Nathan & Nathan Human Resources. And I have recently moved into this role of corporate social responsibility. And as we are getting to understand what the scope of the role is, as a private company, we are not mandated by the government as such to have a CSR or a carbon footprint as such. It's mostly all the bigger MNCs that are required to do this. But still, being an HR company, we said it is the right thing to do. And to build accountability, to build transparency, we found the way forward to be by engagement. So we have an internal working committee, for example, which we set up, where we have employees from the organization who help us make these decisions. And I think that's so key, to move forward. You need to have people from within your organization giving you those ideas, giving you those inputs which are so required. And yes, we solicit also all of the other work that's happening in the region. We kind of we invite people to come across with their ideas, because you have these companies as well who exist just so that you can achieve your CSR targets. So yes, we partner with them as well. And I think all this helps with bringing to the table that element of transparency.
Thank you for sharing, Asha. Anybody else? About holding companies accountable and having more transparency. Down the back, thank you.
My name is Linda, and I work for Atlantis Palm. I just have some thoughts which I wanted to share, because I think that still in the Middle East, we are not very clear about the CSR as the terminology. So you'll find a lot of companies doing charity, they put it under the CSR, which is not the case, because this is something completely different. But what are we, in my point of view, the concept that we built on in Atlantis when we work on the CSR strategy is giving back to the community. So you will find that we have several programs. For instance, releasing fish in the ocean is the CSR, because when you give back to the nature, and we know that with the challenges that we have in place on a global level, when it comes to sustainability and conservation, it's very important. It's a fine line that we need to focus on to protect our environment. Mm-hmm. So that's why we work with different entities, including the Ministry of Environment and Dubai Municipality, to work. We work closely with them on cleaning up the beaches and releasing the fish, which we reproduce. It's a reproduction in Atlantis, because we have the marine mammals that we look after, including the fish hospital, etc. Mm-hmm. The second thing that we focus on is supporting different foundations, like Make-A-Wish Foundation. Make-A-Wish Foundation is a global foundation that looks after the kids who suffer from particular diseases, and they make their wishes come true. Mm-hmm. So we help them to make their wishes come true by visiting us, staying with us, experiencing different activities in the hotel. The other part of the CSR that we are working on is getting the accreditation from AZA. That's the Aquarium and Zoo Association. It's a globally accredited association that looks after the oceans and after the marine animals. So I think with all these initiatives, putting them under the CSR and at the same time maintaining the kind of business that we are doing is very important. Because at the same time, yes, you are maybe some people will be accusing or saying that you're keeping animals in captivity, but at the same time, I think we're giving back to the nature. and we're supporting several activities. So combining the business and at the same time having a CSR program is very important because, and companies and big corporates, they need to understand what's the difference between still maintaining your business, but at the same time having a very clear CSR strategy.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you.
Yes, and if I may, I think it's very important your ideas about to mix, to have together the representative of the government, private company, and NGO. And it's exactly what we will do here in the UAE. And so, for example, we will sign a tripartite agreement with His Excellency Dr. Al-Thani and also the NGO, you know, the WWF of the UAE and NG. I think it's very important, and we will work together. I think that this work together is so important to preserve marine biodiversity.
And that's also where you can have that transparency as well. Florence, I want to ask you, when it comes to building the CSR policy at NG, how did you do that for companies that are here or representatives that are here so they can know the strategy? How did you actually build your policy for CSR? Can you explain for us?
I think that the word is, it's a chosen CSR policy completely in line with our business and our DNA. But I think something also very important is that we have an approach and that we are structured like if it's a project like a business project, meaning that when it's a CSR project, and I think it's very important, it's like another project. So it needs to be on long-term action. It needs to be validated by our investment committee. It needs to have some results. And after we audit these results, it could be financial result or non-financial result. And I think it's very important. It's not, you know, on one side you have finance and business, and on the other side you have CSR. No, exactly the same process in our company.
Okay, so you have that strategy in place and there's that assessment and that audit to make sure that you have long-term goals.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think that CSR is you just throw a bit of money here and put a bit of money here and then you just have, you know, short-term results. So one thing that NG does with excellence is actually have long-term goals that they work towards in the environment and energy. Speaking of that, I just want to focus on your projects in the UAE and Pakistan. Can you share with our audience what you're doing here in the UAE and also in Pakistan?
Wow, a lot of things are happening, you know, in the UAE, and as the young girls say, I think that preserving marine biodiversity is something quite important for the UAE. So I already told with you what this tripartite agreement we will do. But I could also have the example of Ramsar, the scientific Ramsar Convention. It was a very big scientific organization conference in Dubai last month, and we have decided to sponsor this biodiversity convention. It was about wetland. Perhaps you say, okay, what's wetland? You know, wetlands is marshes, lakes, even coral reefs, mangrove, and you know that we have so really nice and beautiful mangroves in Abu Dhabi. And so this scientific work together for the preservation of the wetland. Because do you know, a lot of people are talking about forest, but do you know that wetlands disappear twice as fast as forest? Quite a lot. It's really a huge topic because you know that the preservation of wetlands are very important for the whole ecosystem, I could say, of the humanity. And we all know, and especially here, that we all depend on water. And so perhaps you could say, okay, but what's doing NG with wetlands? It's always the same idea, business. You know, our power plants or desalination plants are on the coast or near wetlands. For example, not so far in Abu Dhabi. And so it seems obvious to us to say, okay, My job is not to know everything about wetlands, but we have some scientific community and they really know about wetlands. So it's why we think it's so important for us to work with Ramsar Convention, so with the scientific community, with these political communities, and with us, and so they could help us to preserve these wetlands.
That's awesome. I'm currently doing a project in Nigeria, and one of the reports we got back from Nigeria is that there's not consistent electricity and power and energy. And when the team came out to Dubai, they were absolutely stunned at all the electricity and energy we have 24/7 with no interruptions. We take it for granted, but there are still parts of the world. Apparently there is 1.2 billion people who still do not have access to energy. Can you imagine? Florence, tell me, what is ENGIE doing about that?
Yes, you're really right. I think that access for energy to all is a huge topic, and this number, 1.2 billion people, don't have still access to energy. It's a terrible thought, especially when you put some name. It's not only 1.2 billion, you know, it's mean that you have Suresh, Manon, a lot of people that still do not have access to energy. And so I would like to share with you the experience of Simpa. What's Simpa? Simpa is an Indian, very small company, and they have a key term system, meaning it's a home solar system that could provide for people light. You could connect a light, you could connect small fridge, you could connect a van, you could connect a mobile charger. So it's quite the minimum for a decent life. And for sure, Simpa is very affordable, and you could have a microcredit with a local bank. And so at the beginning, Simpa was supported, you know, by the ENGIE Foundation, but we have decided at the level of the BU to integrate completely Simpa, because Simpa today lost some money. So for the BU, the question is not really about money, because for sure we will help them to achieve, I could say, a financial balance or 0 plus. But I think that's very important because Simpa, it's a win-win test and learn model. Win-win meaning that we will give energy to people in India, and it's very important, and it's connected to my business. But also we will have the feedback, you know, because for example, Simpa connected today 50K homes, and the target will be 3 times more. And so we have the feedback of these solar panels, meaning technical feedback, because also we could see how will react the home solar panels with the dust, with some specific environment. But also we will have some feedback about the Indian market, about the needs of population. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's very important when you are doing CSR that it's a win-win and test and learn model. So it's exactly this example with Simpa.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see that in Africa. And I think you've already expanded into Africa as well.
Exactly. After the idea, you're completely right. After the idea is to duplicate this in other countries.
That's awesome. Now, you've said that CSR, and you believe that CSR is not optional. It will become a business component as obvious as digital is already now. CSR is not optional. It will become a business component as obvious as digital is already now. Can you explain, Florence?
Yes, I think that you know that CSR, and I'm very pushy on this topic, CSR must be a pillar of your strategy. For me, it's very important. And so remember 10 years ago when everybody was talking about digital. Okay, a lot of people said, okay, digital is more for millennials and perhaps for geek. But now, and I'm sure that here in the audience, all your company have a specific digitalization strategy, because now digital is really very important and part of the strategy. I think it will be exactly the same for CSR. Mm-hmm. In the next year, and when I will be here with you perhaps next year or in 2 years, I'm sure that we could have this conversation and say, okay, you know, CSR now is as digital. it's really a part of the strategy of a company.
So it will become a part of the strategy of the business.
Exactly.
And it will be something that will be monitored, and it will also be something where companies and corporates will have to show results. It will have to be result-driven as well.
Exactly.
Awesome. I can't wait for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of the companies here today evolving and introducing more strategies. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, I'm going to put the microphone over to you now. Any questions you'd like to ask Florence, please raise your hand the last few minutes of this session. There's a microphone coming to you now. Please say your name, and looking forward to your question. Oh, sorry, we have Marie. We have number 2 over here. We're coming to you in a moment.
Hi, Florence. My name is Natalia. I'm from Schneider Electric. I'm HR VP for Gulf and Pakistan, so I think we share a same line of business. I agree with everything that you described, what ENGIE is doing. But one question that I would like to ask you, because CSR is not only external focus, it also has to be internally driven in terms of what you do from the CSR perspective for the population of your employees, or how do you drive engagement or safety, or let's say, how do you empower? So it will be very interesting for me to hear how internally the CSR thinks, or the CSR strategy is applied in ENGIE.
You're completely right. I think it's very important to embark employees, and it's why, for example, at ENGIE, we have some non-financial indicators review, meaning that we have some very specific non-financial indicators, and for each BU, and it's very important for this, our CEO, meaning, of course, of gender diversity, of course, about health and safety, but also about how we share renewable energy, how we help our customers in their energy transition, how we reduce our CO2 emissions. So I think that it's very important, because it's always the same thing. We need to have some process about CSR, and you're completely right. We have these non-financial indicators for all our employees.
Mm-hmm. We had another question down the back. We have time for 2 more questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, my name is Selena. I'm a university student here, and I think it's great. It's so interesting to hear about how passionate you are about CSR initiatives and such big corporations. And I was actually wondering, I saw that ENGIE is led by a female CEO, Isabelle Cocher, and I was wondering if that is something that influences your CSR strategy.
Good question. Yes, you know, our CEO is Isabelle Cocher. So it's the first one CEO for stock-listed company. And so we are very lucky, because she's very pushy about CSR policy. But perhaps we will be disappointed, but I think that CSR is not a question of gender. And I am happy, because I see that a lot of men also are here to talk about CSR. But for sure, she's really pushy. And for example, she is the first CEO that pushed hard to stop coal plants. And so she asked ENGIE to stop coal plants in 2015. You know, it was not an easy decision, because for ENGIE, coal plant business was very important and very profitable. But she really pushed hard to stop coal plants, and I think she opened a new era for ENGIE, meaning that, and we talk about it, it was quite give a lot of pride of the employee to say, okay, we are the first company that stopped coal plants development. And also for our, it increased also our, I could say, employer brand. I think it's very important, and I see that there is some young people here. I think that the young generation are really in search of sense for their careers. And so I think that also for the employer brands, it's quite important. So yes, we are very lucky, because we have a very inspiring woman, and she has a vision, she's a leadership, and she's very pushy, you know. She's the first one also during Davos, you know, the summit Davos. She was the first one to push the B economy, meaning that we need now to understand that to have the hard economic actors in one side and the soft NGO on the other side, this model has completely reached its limits. So we need together to imagine the new B economy. And it's what's new B economy? Meaning that you need to link profit, you need to link caring people, and you need to link caring environment. So yes, we are very lucky to have Isabelle Kocher because she's so inspiring and she's pushing CSR. And I am the first fan of Isabelle Kocher.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our session. Please know that we're among friends. This event has been running for over a decade, so if you do want to approach Florence privately or in the tea and coffee break, feel free to do so. She's absolutely wonderful. Chatting with her is like chatting with a friend. Please thank our guest. Put your hands together. The Executive Vice President for Strategy at NG, Florence Fontani.